The laughter rang in my ears like a gunshot. A sharp, stinging kind of sound that made my stomach twist. I sat there, staring at the flimsy paper card on my assigned seat. The words burned into my mind like a brand. Single father waiter. Not guest. Not even ex-husband. Just an afterthought. A joke. My ex-wife's sister, Laura, had always been a brat. But this was low, even for her. I glanced across the lavishly decorated reception hall. Golden chandeliers, white rose centerpieces, expensive champagne bubbling in crystal glasses. It was a celebration of money, status, and power. And here I was, the entertainment for the evening. My mother-in-law, Deborah, leaned forward, her perfectly manicured fingers brushing the pearls around her neck as she cackled. "Tonight's waiter," she announced, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "Just a used product." The laughter erupted again, rolling like a wave through the guests. Faces twisted with amusement, whispers passed between tables, and my ex-wife, Emily, sat at the head table, smirking into her wine glass. I clenched my fists under the table, biting the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to say something. But before I could move, a small voice broke through the noise. "I have a gift for the bride." Silence. I turned my head, my pulse hammering. My 7-year-old son, Jake, stood in front of the microphone. His tiny hands gripped the mic stand, knuckles white. His messy brown hair, just like mine, fell over his forehead as he looked straight at his Aunt Laura. Emily froze. The smile melted off Laura's face. A bead of sweat trickled down my spine. Jake's voice was steady, too steady for a kid his age. "Actually, she is." The hall was dead quiet now. Even the clinking of silverware stopped. Emily's eyes widened, and for the first time that night, I saw something flicker in them: panic. And just like that, the perfect, polished world they had built around their lives began to crack. Jake's voice cut through the silence like a knife. Every pair of eyes in the room locked onto him. Emily's fingers curled around her wine glass, knuckles turning white. Laura's expression twitched, her perfect bridal smile stiffening like it had been glued in place. I didn't breathe. Jake shifted on his feet, gripping the microphone tighter. His little chest rose and fell rapidly, but his voice stayed firm. "She is." He hesitated for half a second, then turned his head, looking straight at his mother. "She is just like you, Mom." Emily's entire body stiffened. The tension in the room snapped tight like a drawn bowstring. The whispers started immediately, hushed, frantic murmurs rippling across the tables. I could feel the weight of every gaze swinging between me, Jake, and Emily. Laura shot Emily a sharp look, her hands tightening around the bouquet. "What the hell does that mean?" Jake's lips pressed together, his small hands clenching. "It means she pretends to love people, but she's lying." A gasp. Emily shot up from her chair, her face flushing red. "Jake, that's enough." Jake turned toward me then, his big, brown eyes, so much like mine, filled with something I hadn't seen before. A quiet, simmering anger. "Dad," he said, voice smaller now, but still strong. "Tell them." My throat tightened. Emily's sharp inhale reached me before her nails did. Her perfectly manicured hand landed on my forearm under the table, her grip iron hard. Her nails dug into my skin, a silent warning. "Don't." I could hear her voice in my head, that same manipulative, venom-laced whisper she used whenever she twisted the truth to suit her. But this time, she wasn't in control. I stared at her, watching the mask she had so carefully crafted slip for the first time. Her wide blue eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, for a way to spin this in her favor. I could have let her squirm, could have let her drown in the moment. But instead, I turned to my son, my chest tightening with something raw, something real. "You want me to tell them the truth?" I asked, my voice low. Jake nodded once. I looked up. The entire wedding reception was frozen, waiting. I exhaled slowly and let the words fall, heavy and final. "Your mother cheated on me." The words hung in the air like a gunshot. A collective gasp swept through the room, followed by a thick, suffocating silence. The music had stopped, waiters stood frozen in place, guests exchanged stunned glances. Emily's face drained of color, her lips parting slightly as if trying to form a response, but no words came. She looked like a cornered animal, eyes darting from face to face, searching for a way out. Laura slammed her bouquet down onto the table. "Are you out of your mind?" she hissed, her voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. "You come to my wedding and pull this stunt?" A bitter laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. "Your wedding," I repeated, shaking my head. "Laura, I didn't come here to do this. Your family brought me here to humiliate me." That seat, the card, the announcement. But you want to talk about stunts? How about your sister sleeping with someone else while she was still married to me? Emily found her voice, but it was brittle, desperate. Stop it, she whispered, stepping forward, her heels clicking against the marble floor. You don't know what you're saying, Adam. I turned to her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt nothing but disgust. I know exactly what I'm saying, I replied, my voice steady. And so does Jake. You think you didn't notice? You think you were subtle? Sneaking out late at night, smiling at your phone like a damn teenager, treating me like I was just furniture in the house while you were out playing house with someone else. Emily's breathing turned shallow, her hands trembling. This isn't the time or place, she seethed through clenched teeth, eyes flashing with rage. Jake's small voice cut through the tension again. Mom, why did you lie to us? And just like that, whatever control Emily had left shattered. Her expression twisted, the mask of the loving wife and mother peeling away to reveal the selfish, manipulative woman beneath. I lied because I had to, she snapped, her voice rising. Because your father wasn't enough for me. Because I deserved more than a boring husband who, she stopped herself, her mouth pressing into a thin line, realizing she had just said too much. A wave of murmurs spread through the crowd. I could see the judgment in their eyes now, not for me, but for her. The golden girl, the perfect wife, the victim of a failed marriage. The lie had crumbled, and all that was left was the truth she had spent so long hiding. I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back. You deserved more? I repeated, my voice calm but sharp. What exactly did you deserve, Emily? Someone with more money? More attention? Someone who didn't spend years making sure you and Jake had everything you needed while you threw it all away. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Laura stepped in. This is my wedding, she hissed, her voice shaking with anger. You've ruined it. I turned to her, and for the first time that night, I smiled. A real, satisfied smile. No, Laura, I said, my voice even. Your sister ruined it. And with that, I took Jake's hand and walked away. Emily's voice chased after me as I walked through the stunned crowd, Jake's small hand gripping mine tightly. Adam, don't you dare walk away from me. I didn't stop. Not this time. Not for her. The exit was just a few feet away when I heard the sound of heels clacking rapidly behind me. Then, suddenly, Emily's hand latched onto my arm, nails digging into my skin. You are not doing this, she hissed, voice low and sharp, her breath hot against my ear. You are not making me the bad guy in front of my family. I turned slowly, looking down at her, really looking at her. Her face, once so composed, was twisted with fury, her eyes wide and desperate. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She was just angry she had been exposed. You did that all on your own, sweetheart, I said, yanking my arm free from her grip. Her face twitched at the word sweetheart. It was the same fake affection she had used on me in the months leading up to our divorce, the same empty endearment she whispered right before sneaking off to whatever excuse she had lined up that night. Jake tugged at my hand, his voice small. Dad, can we go home? Something in my chest cracked at the sound of it. My son, my innocent, 7-year-old boy, forced to witness his mother's mask slip right off her face. I knelt down to him, ignoring the seething woman standing above me. Yeah, but we're going home. I stood, locking eyes with Emily one last time. You don't get to decide how this ends anymore, I told her, voice steady. You lost that right the second you chose him. She flinched, her jaw clenching. Then a voice, smug and dripping with mockery, cut through the tension. I'd say this is awkward, but honestly, I saw it coming. I turned to see him. Ryan, the man she left me for. He stood near the bar, casually swirling a glass of whiskey, wearing that infuriating smirk I had only ever seen on men who thought they were untouchable. You really had to do this at a wedding, man? Ryan said, shaking his head with exaggerated pity. It's kind of pathetic, don't you think? Jake's fingers tightened around mine, and for the first time in a long time, I saw red. I closed the distance between us in 3 strides, shoving the whiskey glass out of his hand. It shattered against the marble floor, the sharp sound cutting through the gasps of onlookers. Ryan barely had time to react before my fist connected with his jaw. He stumbled back, knocking into a table, the 4 sending plates and silverware clattering to the ground. A few guests screamed. Others jumped to their feet. Emily rushed forward, hands flying to Ryan's face. Oh my God. Adam, you're insane. Ryan groaned, holding his jaw, but the smirk never left his face. You always were insecure, he muttered, spitting out a little blood. No wonder she got bored. I didn't hit him again. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But Jake was watching, his eyes wide, his little hands still gripping mine. I exhaled sharply and stepped back. This. I gestured between them. This is what you threw our family away for? Emily didn't answer. She just stood there, frozen, as I turned my back on both of them and walked out of that wedding, my son by my side. The cold night air hit my face as we stepped outside, but it did nothing to cool the fire raging inside me. My knuckles throbbed from the punch, but I barely felt it. Jake's little hand clung to mine, and that was the only thing keeping me from turning around and finishing what I started. I opened the car door, helping Jake into his seat. He was quiet, too quiet for a kid who had just watched his father throw a punch at his mother's new man. I crouched beside him, buckling him in. "Are you okay, buddy?" I asked, trying to soften my voice, to push down the fury still boiling under my skin. He nodded slowly, then met my eyes. "Are you?" I forced a smile, but I knew it wasn't convincing. "I will be." I shut his door and walked around to the driver's side, gripping the wheel as I slid into my seat. My hands were still shaking. I took a deep breath, trying to focus on anything but the mess I had just walked away from. A tap on the window made me look up. Laura. I rolled it down just enough to hear her, already bracing myself for whatever venom she was about to spit. Instead, she just sighed, her arms crossed, her wedding dress slightly wrinkled from the chaos. "You really had to do that tonight?" I let out a sharp laugh, shaking my head. "Don't act like this wasn't planned. You all wanted a show, Laura. You just didn't expect it to turn on Emily." She bit her lip, hesitating. "Look, I didn't know it was that bad. I mean, yeah, I knew she was messing around, but I thought you'd moved on. Would you move on if your kid had to watch his mother lie to his face every day?" I snapped. If he had to sit there and wonder why his family wasn't the same anymore? Laura's face tightened. She exhaled through her nose, shaking her head. "Look, I didn't come out here to argue, but you need to be careful." I narrowed my eyes. "Careful of what?" She glanced back at the venue doors like she was making sure no one was listening. Then, in a low voice, she said, "Emily's not going to take this lying down. You embarrassed her in front of everyone, Adam. She's going to make your life hell for it." I clenched my jaw. "She already has." Laura hesitated again, then pulled something from the small white clutch bag she was holding. A folded piece of paper. "Take this," she said, slipping it through the crack in the window. "I found it in her purse earlier. Thought you might want to see it before she gets rid of it." I took it without a word, unfolding it as she turned and walked away. One glance at the words on the page, and my blood ran cold. It was a lawyer's letter. Custody modification request. Emily wasn't just cheating. She was trying to take Jake away from me. The words blurred as I stared at the paper in my hands, my grip tightening until the edges crumpled. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, a slow, heavy drumbeat of rage. She wasn't just done with me, she wanted to erase me. Take Jake. Take everything. I forced myself to breathe, to push down the boiling fury long enough to think straight. I couldn't lose it now, not with Jake sitting right behind me, watching. I folded the paper carefully and stuffed it into my jacket pocket. My fingers clenched into fists before I started the car. The ride home was quiet. Jake was staring out the window, his little hands in his lap. I knew he had questions. I knew this wasn't over for him. I pulled into our driveway and shut off the engine. Neither of us moved for a moment. The street was dark, the glow of the porch light casting long shadows. Jake finally turned to me, his voice small. "Is Mom gonna take me away?" I gritted my teeth, my stomach twisting at the fear in his voice. "No," I said firmly. "She's not." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded, as if deciding to believe me. But I could see it, the doubt, the worry. I had to fix this. Inside, I got him ready for bed, tucking him in like I always did. But tonight, he clung to my arm a little longer. "Dad," he whispered. "Yeah, you're not gonna leave me, right?" I felt my throat tighten. I brushed his hair back and forced myself to smile. "Never, buddy. No matter what." He stared at me as if memorizing my face, then finally let go, rolling onto his side. I sat there for a moment, watching his small chest rise and fall. Then, quietly, I stood and left the room. I walked straight to my desk, pulling out the lawyer's letter again, smoothing the creases. She thought she could do this. Thought she could tear my son away from me like I was some disposable afterthought. She was wrong. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I never thought I'd have to use. A divorce lawyer. I hit call. It rang twice before a voice answered. "Hello." I took a deep breath. I need to make sure my ex-wife never gets the chance to take my son. There was a pause, Then a calm, steady reply. Tell me everything. So I did. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's smirk at the wedding, Ryan's smug face, my son's worried expression. The paper sat on my desk, taunting me, reminding me that this wasn't over. That she wasn't just a mistake I could walk away from, she was a war I had to fight. Morning came too fast. Jake was still asleep when I got up, but my mind was already racing. I had a meeting with the lawyer in 2 hours, and I needed every piece of evidence I could gather. Emily had spent years lying, manipulating, twisting everything in her favor. But now, she had slipped up. The custody modification meant she wasn't just trying to win, she was scared of losing. I started digging. Emails, messages, financial records. Anything that showed the truth. The late-night withdrawals from our joint account when we were still married. The unexplained hotel charges. The messages that seemed innocent at first glance but had a pattern, always late, always deleted when I confronted her. Then I found something better. An email from her to Ryan. I need you to back me up in court. I can't have Adam making me look bad. You know what to say. Stick to the story. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding. This wasn't just a fight for Jake anymore. This was proof. I saved everything, backed it up twice, then got ready. When I walked into the lawyer's office, the receptionist barely looked up. You're early, she said. Good, I replied. Minutes later, I was sitting across from a man who looked like he had seen it all. Graying hair, sharp eyes, the kind of face that didn't flinch at bad news. He skimmed through the papers I brought, nodding slowly. You've got enough to put her in a bad position, he said finally. But it's not just about evidence. The judge will look at who's the more stable parent, the one who provides the best environment for the child. I already knew where this was going, and she's going to paint me as the bitter ex-husband trying to get revenge. Exactly. He set the papers down. But there's something worse. I felt my stomach tighten. What? He tapped the custody request. She's trying to move out of state. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. She what? She wants full custody so she can relocate. He looked up, his expression grim. If she wins, you won't just lose time with your son. You'll lose him completely. My hands curled into fists. I had known she was ruthless, but this? She's not getting away with this, I said, my voice low. He nodded. Then let's get to work. I leaned forward. Tell me how to destroy her case. The next few weeks became a battle, one I wasn't going to lose. Every minute I wasn't working or taking care of Jake, I was building my case. My lawyer, Davis, was ruthless, exactly what I needed. He knew every trick Emily was going to pull before she even tried it. And she tried. The first thing she did was start playing the perfect mother. Suddenly, she was calling Jake more, sending gifts, acting like she cared about the routine she had ignored for years. She even showed up at my doorstep one evening, fake tears in her eyes, trying to play the victim. I never wanted it to be like this, she whispered, wrapping her arms around herself as she stood in the doorway. You're making me out to be some kind of monster, Adam. I stared at her, disgusted. You did that all by yourself. Her lips trembled, her blue eyes wide, but I knew her too well. She was acting, just like always. Please, she said, stepping closer, lowering her voice like we were still something, like she still had power over me. Let's just figure this out without lawyers. For Jake's sake. I let out a sharp laugh. For Jake's sake. I pulled my phone from my pocket, tapping the screen. The email she sent to Ryan was still open. I turned it so she could see the words. Her face drained of color. You don't get to play the good mother now, I said, my voice cold. Not after everything. For a split second, I saw it, the real her. The mask slipping. The fury in her eyes. Then she smiled, slow and sharp. Fine, she said. You want war? You've got it. She turned and walked away, heels clicking against the pavement, not even bothering to look back. I shut the door, exhaling slowly. I knew what was coming next. And I was ready. The first legal attack hit within days. She filed for an emergency hearing, claiming I was emotionally unstable, that Jake was scared of me. She brought in friends, her friends, who lied under oath, saying I had been distant, angry, that Jake had expressed concerns about living with me. She thought she could bury me under lies. She had no idea who she was dealing with. Davis destroyed her claims one by one. He brought in teachers, neighbors, people who actually knew me and Jake. He showed records of how she had neglected him for months while she was busy sneaking around with Ryan. He even pulled up her bank statements, proving she was already planning her move out of state before filing for custody. The judge wasn't stupid. By the time the hearing ended, Emily's carefully crafted narrative had collapsed. The judge denied her request for full custody. Instead, she was given supervised visits until the case was settled. She lost. She knew it. And she hated me for it. I should have felt victorious. But as I walked out of that courthouse, Jake holding my hand, I didn't feel like I had one. I had just survived round one. And Emily wasn't done yet. I knew Emily wouldn't go down quietly. The loss in court only made her more desperate, more vicious. She didn't care about Jake. She cared about winning. And when she realized she couldn't take him legally, she resorted to what she did best. Lies. Manipulation. Destruction. It started with small things. Rumors spread through mutual friends, whispers about how I had turned Jake against her. Then she tried guilt, calling late at night, her voice trembling, playing the heartbroken mother. When that didn't work, she went for the kill. She showed up at Jake's school unannounced. I got the call while I was at work. "Mr. Carter, your ex-wife is here demanding to take Jake," the school secretary said, her voice tight. "She's causing a scene." I dropped everything and got there as fast as I could. When I walked into the office, Jake was sitting in a chair, his small hands gripping the arms tightly. Emily stood over him, her voice raised, her crocodile tears streaming down her face. "I am his mother. I have a right to see him," she was shouting at the principal. The second she saw me, her face twisted into something ugly. "You're poisoning him against me," she spat, stepping toward me. "You've turned my own son into a stranger." I looked at Jake. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He wasn't crying. He wasn't saying anything. He was just shutting down. And that's when I knew. She had already lost him. Not because of me. Not because of the court. But because she had made herself into something he couldn't trust. I stepped forward, calm, controlled. "Jake," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Do you want to go with your mother?" He didn't even hesitate. He shook his head. Emily's breath caught. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not fear of losing a case. Fear of losing him forever. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The principal cleared her throat. "Mrs. Carter, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Emily turned to me, fury replacing the shock. "This isn't over," she whispered. "You can't erase me." I looked her dead in the eye. "You did that yourself." She left without another word. Jake let out a slow breath, his shoulders relaxing for the first time since I had walked in. I crouched down beside him. "You okay, buddy?" He nodded. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, "She doesn't love me, does she?" I felt my chest tighten. I could have lied. I could have told him what people always tell kids, that their parents love them no matter what. But I wasn't going to do that to him. "She loves herself more," I said softly. He stared at me for a long time, then just nodded. Like he already knew. That was the last time she tried to take him. The final custody ruling came a month later. I got full custody. Emily got supervised visits, but she barely showed up. The calls stopped. The messages stopped. She faded into the background, just like every other selfish choice she had made in her life. Jake didn't ask about her. He didn't cry for her. And I didn't either. The day after the ruling, I took Jake out for ice cream. We sat outside in the sun, just the two of us, the weight of the past finally lifting. He looked up at me, spoon in his mouth, and grinned. "We don't have to go to any more weddings, right?" I laughed, ruffling his hair. "Not if I can help it." And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.